Brother Reuel Stewart is with us, and he is he's a good evangelist. He's very gifted at getting the word across to people. We thought he would share a couple testimonies with you, and also an experience that he had of life after death, which really helped to prepare him for his own identical twin brother's death sometime later. And it's a great testimony, and I just thought you'd really be blessed by it. So are you with us, Reuel?
Yes, I am.
All right. You know, I've always called you Reuel, but your wife always tells us his name is Reuel. So I guess I just never have been able to change after calling you Reuel for so many years, I guess. But anyway, this is Reuel. He's going to bless us today, right, Reuel? Please take your time and share with the brethren whatever you feel to. Okay?
All righty. Well, just if it makes you feel any better, everybody in my family calls me Reuel too, including myself. So I guess
okay.
It's just an easier way to say it. But
yep.
Well, I guess the Lord will have to give me the strength to be able to talk on the phone, because I'm not very good at talking on the phone.
Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. We claim it in the name of Jesus.
But we did
Father, bless him
so
in the name of Jesus, Lord. Bless him to be able to share this in a very blessed way, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Well, I guess I'll start with there were some brethren that had heard that I'd had an experience where I died, and they last time I visited with them, they were saying they wanted to hear it. So I guess this is one way they'll be able to hear the testimony along with whoever else is out there. But I was about roughly around 18 at the time, and I had been brought up knowing the Lord from a child. I was in a missionary. My parents were missionaries at the time, and I was brought up knowing the Lord, and we ended up leaving, I guess, missionary work when I was about 12 years old. And after that, I had, I guess, the understanding that I pretty much knew everything about God because I had been brought up in it, and I felt I was really kind of in line with the Lord, and I pretty much stopped seeking the Lord or reading the Bible much after I was about 12. I still would pray and all that, but I just kind of started slowly drifting more and more away from the Lord, just in the sense of falling into the world and just getting weak spiritually. But by the age of about 19, 19 and 20 is when I started getting, I guess you could say, just into a lot of bad habits like smoking marijuana and stuff. But before that happened, I was about 18 at the time, and I was swimming in a pool. Me and my twin brother were really, really good at athletic stuff, and I was swimming in my pool with a friend of mine that was visiting from Canada, and my aunt was in there. And the pool is about 24 to 25 feet long, and I was kind of showing off, I guess, and seeing how many laps I could do under the water in one breath. And me and my twin brother would be able to hold our breath for over 3 minutes. And so we kind of, you know, I guess we're kind of prideful about that. But I was swimming under the water, and I did 7 laps, and on my 8th lap, I got about halfway back to the pool, and I realized, I was like, well, I'm out of air, so I guess I'm going to go up for air. And as I was swimming up for air, I saw the water, basically my top of my head. When my head hit the top of the water, the moment that happened, my body just stayed laying face down in the water, and my spirit just left my body, just kept going up. And as that happened, the moment that happened, I I just instantly felt like all the weights of this earth. It's hard to explain, but at the time I didn't have any job other than working for my dad 2 days a week, and I was staying with my parents. I didn't have any real, what you would call, stressful situations in my life that most people would consider stressful. If anything, my life would be what you would consider just a really laid back, easy, kind of lazy life. But when I left my body, it was the verse, I guess, that I can best describe it, is that God will give you peace that passes all understanding. Well, this peace that I was feeling was something to this day I've never felt. I've been able to describe good, but one way I guess I put it out is even just the burden of having to eat and drink and change your clothes and just doing your basic things in life every day, brushing your teeth, all that stuff, those are actually burdens, whether we realize it or not. And once you leave this physical body, all those burdens and all that stuff is just gone, and you feel a feeling of peace that I've never felt in my life. And I just remember being just kind of amazed at the moment that happened. And as I was leaving my body, it was like I just was ascending further up into the sky at a fairly fast pace. And I was able to look down and see myself just laying in the pool as this was all happening. I was watching everything that was going on, while at the same time, it seemed like within a very short period of time, I was almost like in space, because I was so far away from the Earth. But at the same time, I could see everything, because when you leave this Earth, nothing is the same as we look at. We don't look at stuff through physical eyes anymore. We don't have time, so none of those things that hold us to the laws of this earth have any power anymore. So even though it seemed like I was a long distance away, I could look down at any moment. I was able to see everything that was going on in the pool in great detail. And at the same time, I was brought to the entrance of I guess one of the gates of heaven, you could say, because the city was so big, I wasn't able to see the entire city. I was at one side of it, and I was looking into these gates, and the gates were opened, and there was an angel at the entrance of the gate talking to me and explaining to me things. I was asking him questions, and I remember when I looked into heaven, it was just the most beautiful thing that that I've never felt I've been able to describe. Just the walls and the gates. I don't know too much about namings of precious stones and all that, but it seemed like the walls were almost like a transparent, glowing type of almost like diamond or crystal or something. And inside the streets and stuff were just so glowing of like almost like I guess the way the Bible describes it, almost like transparent gold is the best way to describe it, but it still doesn't even feel like it justifies what you're seeing. And those are like the ugliest things. I mean, how beautiful is a wall or a street? You know, they're kind of like the ugliest things on earth. Well, the most ugliest things in heaven are more beautiful than the things that people cherish the most on earth. And the grass is just so, it was just, the colors and stuff are so brilliant and beautiful that I can't even give a depiction of the colors, because they weren't even able to compare with any of the colors that I know on earth. It was just the whole view of it was just completely so much more spectacular than anything I'd ever seen on earth. I was just looking inside it. I never entered the gate. I was outside looking inside, and I could see angelic beings inside. You know, kind of like how you would see in kind of like a city, except they were angelic figures, and there was all kinds of it was like a town inside with, I mean, like you had grass and trees and everything in there too, but it was just totally different than anything I've ever seen on earth when it came to the colors and the brilliance of it. And I remember just being just so amazed at it and awed at its beauty, and just the peace I was feeling was so wonderful that like the thought of what I'd just gone through, of dying and having to experience death and going there, was completely the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to me in my life. So I wasn't even paying attention, even though I was able to see myself laying in the water. I wasn't even really paying attention to that at all. I was just all impressed and I guess amazed at what I was seeing in heaven. And as I was looking at all this, I was asking the angel like just all these questions, and he was just a really really just loving being, and was just real calm and answering all the questions that I was asking him, and it seemed like this experience in since there's no time, it just seemed like it just lasted a long period of time, like several hours to me, even though there's no time. It just what I would compare all the things we went through in I guess the understanding we have here on Earth of time. It seemed like it was hours and hours of talking that I had done, and questions that I had asked, and answers I had received from this angel that I was talking to. And as I was asking him all these questions, eventually the conversation turned back to to my body being left on Earth, and we started looking down at there, and he started talking to me about whether or not I was going to be going back and whatnot. And I was kind of at this time in my life hadn't done I hadn't done much for the Lord, other than I felt I'd known him my whole life, but obviously I hadn't really done much in serving the Lord, or really being a testimony to anyone, since the last time I was really I guess serious about the Lord and really seeking him was when I was 12. I used to read my Bible very often, and my dad would read the Bible with us for hours a day as kids, and I had kind of lost my testimony in the last 6 years throughout my teenage life. But at this point, I wasn't really shown much about how little I had done for the Lord. I was more just shown the situation I was in, and what I could do, that there was more I could do for the Lord. And at the time I was young, and I remember thinking, yeah, there's more I could do for the Lord. And this discussion seemed like it went on for quite some time, of me and the angel talking about me going back and or staying. And I just remember thinking that I didn't want to come back, because I was just like so happy where I was. And then I remember the decision finally coming down to it, where I needed to, the decision had to be made at that point. And I don't remember making a decision. I don't remember saying either way what I wanted to do. But at that point, the next thing that happened was I just saw, by this time, they had finally realized I hadn't been moving in the water, and they had left me there for quite some time, because they knew I could hold my breath. And there would be times when I'd be swimming where I would just lay in the water at the bottom of the pool for 3 or 4 minutes holding my breath, and sometimes people would go and think, like it had been too long, so they'd go and try to, see what I was up to, and they'd pull me out of the water, and I'd be like, what were you doing messing with me, So because of my pride and them having known that I would do that so often, they left me in there for a lot longer than most people would have before they finally decided to lift me out of the water. And when they lifted me out of the water, they said I was all blue. And by this time they had pulled me out, and I was sitting there watching it, and they lifted me up and kind of leaned me over the side of the pool, and they started panicking, of course, and screaming to call 911 and all that. And my aunt, who's half paralyzed, was holding me over the side of the pool trying to keep my head out of the water, while my friend ran into the house yelling for my mom and everybody to call 911. And as I was watching this, my mom came running out of the pool and right towards the pool from the house. And right when that happened is when it seemed like I just started like almost shooting back down towards my body. And as it's happening, it's like it was almost like I was coming from almost from space, shooting down, seeing everything, getting closer and closer to the point where almost like someone falling from the sky. And when I hit my body, the moment my spirit hit my body again, I instantly just stood up stood up by the side of the pool. I instantly stood up. It was about 5 foot deep pool, one of those above ground pools. And I stood up in the pool, and the moment that happened, I could taste the chlorine in my lungs. There wasn't any water left in them, but I could taste chlorine in my lungs. And I remember just that taste of chlorine in my lungs, and then the first thought that came to mind, like everyone was screaming and panicking, but then the moment I came back, they just were kind of like, oh, well, he's back, and they didn't really know how to react. So they're like, do we need to call them? Do we still need to, tell the ambulance to come? And they're all like debating what to do. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, are you sure you don't want them to check you up? And I'm like, no. And I was just kind of, if anything, more like frustrated, like, what? I'm back, I wish I could have stayed there, that place was so awesome. And the moment I came back, all those kind of weights that of just your everyday life instantly came back on me, and I felt heavy again, and I was just kind of like, oh man, I was like, I'm back, and I just was kind of still totally pondering everything that I had talked about, the angel and stuff. But one of the first things that happened to me is right when I hit my body, all the details of what we had discussed, all the questions I had asked, all the details and answers he had given me were gone. Like I couldn't remember all the answers he had given me about everything that I had asked him about. And I remember just thinking, I want to meditate on this and just try to remember everything that had just happened, because it was just something that doesn't happen to you every day. So my family was trying to, like, they were just kind of mixed emotions because of everything that had just happened, and they're still trying to, like, talk to me and see what's going on and everything. And I just kind of told them, I was like, no, I'm fine, don't call anybody, I'm fine. And I just kind of got out of the pool and walked over and locked myself in my room, and I stayed in there for about 30 minutes just kind of meditating on everything that had happened. And after I thought about it for about 30 minutes, I started wondering how, because to me it seemed like hours that I was gone, and I hadn't asked anyone like how long it was to them on Earth, and I was kind of thinking they just called the ambulance, so I'm like, how long did they leave me there? Did they leave me in there? Did they get out of the pool and forget I was there and come back 2 or 3 hours later? And, I'm trying to figure out, how long I was out. So I thought, well, I'm going to go talk to my friend who was in the pool with me and ask her, how long I was out for in her understanding of the experience. So I went and I found her, and I was like, and I asked her, I was like, well, how long was I laying down in the pool before you guys, turned me over? And she was like, oh, probably like 15 or 20 minutes. And I was like, 15 or 20 minutes? I was like, that's it? And I was kind of like, that whole thing was only 15 or 20 minutes? And then maybe another 5 minutes from the time they started panicking and calling 911 or whatever. So roughly around 20 minutes or so is the time that the whole experience happened on Earth. And I remember thinking about that and being like, that's one of the first times I experienced not dealing with time as we have on Earth. And I thought about that experience for the rest of my life. I've always looked back at that as an interesting and pretty amazing thing that I had gone through. But I didn't think too much of it, other than that I had seen into heaven, and I was kind of like wondering why I had come back and stuff, and because I never made any decisions. So I hadn't really connected much of why the Lord had put me through that, other than I was knowing that one thing is, if you ever do die in the Lord, there's not really much to worry about. And the verse of, the Bible's saying, though, that we're not supposed to mourn, when the righteous people die, because they're in a better place. And that verse makes total sense after you experience something like this. You do not have to worry about any brethren in the Lord going to be with God, because they're so much happier than they ever could possibly be on earth. So anyways, in that experience, I didn't really relate much to it, other than, I guess, my own physical desires of how beautiful and wonderful it was, and more just kind of maybe it would have been nice if I had just stayed there, But I think the Lord allowed me not to remember a lot of the details about it, because I might have been depressed the rest of my life being on earth, And so he took some of the details of what I had been debating with the angel away from me, and some of the things that I guess would I guess I didn't need to remember when I got back. And those are the things I was really trying to meditate on when I had, in that half an hour that I was really back and just sitting in my room. But then about 3 years later, when I was 21 years old, I was in Maine at the time working with my brother, my older brother, Elias, and my twin brother, Reuben, was working with my old boss in Michigan doing the same job I used to do as a framer, building houses. And my boss had bought a real fancy yacht, kind of a small yacht or boat, and he would like to show it off to everybody after work and try to invite people all the time to go out with him on the boat. And on one day, after work, my boss invited my brother, my twin brother, my brother-in-laws ended up going with him, and some other friends from work ended up going on the boat. And they drove out to the middle of the lake, and they just went out to the lake, and a lot of the guys, my boss and a lot of the guys, just started drinking beers and stuff. And my twin brother was always one who never, by this time I had started smoking like some weed, a little bit of weed on the weekends and stuff. I was starting to get into some bad habits and stuff. And my twin brother was always, that was one thing that we weren't completely seeing eye to eye on. In everything else in our life, since we were identical twins, we always almost could like read each other's thoughts at all times, almost feel exactly what the other one was feeling. And there'd even be times where if he was in a debate with somebody, talking to them about something, and I walked in the middle of the conversation, and even if he was messing with them, I would know exactly how to respond to be in agreement with my twin brother, just because our thoughts and our character was so identical. We were like really connected, like really close. And I have 10 brothers and sisters, but my relationship and my connection with my twin brother was just above and beyond anything that I had with any of my other brothers and sisters, which I was close to in my family too, but not anything like my twin brother. We had our whole life planned to be together and to buy property together and build our houses and raise our families on the same property and everything. And all our plans was just we liked all the same things, and about the only thing I could say was different was the fact that he never really fell away from God. He was never into fornication or drugs and drunkenness. Those type of things were things that he just didn't have a desire for. And about the only thing that maybe I felt in his heart wasn't right towards God was he had a little bit of bitterness towards my mom and my older sister. Not any real bitterness, but a little bit towards them for just things that had happened to him growing up in the way they had treated him and stuff. But about 6 months before this experience, before this trip on this boat, he had come back from from living on his own, and he had spent about 6 months with my parents and my mom, and he had just totally forgiven them, because we would talk all the time. He just, like, the Lord had just given him the grace. And I remember at the time, even though I wasn't really close to the Lord, I just was amazed that there was something different about him that I didn't have, that he had. And it was, since everything else about us was so identical, I was a little puzzled how he just had this total transformation in being able to just forgive his mom and his sister, and even my older brother. And there were some things that had happened in his life with them that he had been, not majorly, but slightly had some differences between them. But he had just totally, like, forgiven them, to the point where he came to visit us about a week before this whole thing happened. And he was just completely loving towards my older brother, but not just saying it, but since I could feel what he was feeling, it was like I could feel that it was from his heart. And I was really just kind of amazed at how he had this change. And I thought it was good, because those were one of the only things that one of the other things that we were a little different in, is I didn't have much bitterness towards anyone, whereas there was just a few people he was bitter for, but he had totally been delivered from that, and was just almost, I guess you could say, just filled with the Spirit. And at the time, I didn't really know too much about the Holy Spirit and stuff, because I hadn't really experienced it too much in my life. And but looking back at it now, I can see that he was filled with the Spirit, and just had this real deep, like, sincere love from the heart toward them, and he had just total forgiveness, and just in being with them, I could sense his love towards them, and just total peace. And I was really it was something that I had been pondering as I was watching this change for the last 6 or so months in his life. And then and I was real encouraged by it, and I remember talking to him about that I was real glad that he was able to get through that. So back to where he went on the boat with my boss, my old boss as a framer. They went out on the boat, and they stopped the boat somewhere near the middle of the lake, or somewhere far out in the water, and they were everyone was drinking beer and stuff, and just kind of partying on the boat. And my twin brother, since he wasn't really into that stuff, and we were, like I said, both real good at swimming and holding our breath and whatnot, he decided he was just going to go off by himself and take a swim, and he was going to swim to the bottom of the lake and touch the bottom of the lake. So he jumped in the water, and the guys were all like, "Hey, where are you going?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to swim to the bottom of the lake." And a lot of the guys were like, "Oh, you can't do that. It's way too deep out here. We're in the middle of the lake." And he said, "Well, we were always pretty much, if someone told us we couldn't do it, we were the type of guys that were like, well, we're going to try, and if we can't, at least, in his situation, I guess he ended up dying trying, But he did swim to the bottom of the lake, and he came back, and he told them he made it to the bottom of the lake, and no one believed him. They're all like, "No, you didn't make it." And he said, "Oh, yeah." And he's like, "I'll do it again." And they're like, "Yeah, go and bring us some dirt this time." And I said, "Okay, I'll swim down. I'll bring a handful of dirt up." So he swam down a second time, and he came back up, and he didn't have any dirt, because he told them he made it, but they're like, "Where's the dirt?" And he told them, he said, "Well, when it was all mud, so when I grabbed it with my fingers, by the time I swam back up, it all just slipped through my fingers and washed out through my fingers, so I couldn't really bring any dirt up." And everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, you're just saying that." So he said, he told one of the guys to give him a cup. And he's like, "Give me a cup, and I'll fill it up with dirt, and I'll bring it back." So they gave him a cup. They threw a cup in the water, and he grabbed the cup, and he swam down to the bottom of the lake, and all the people were on the boat waiting for him to come back. And they said when he came back up, they said that his hand came out of the water, and the cup was in his hand, and it was full of dirt. And they said his arm came completely out of the water, and the top of his head came up out of the water. And they said they thought he came up, enough of his forehead was showing that they thought he came up and grabbed a breath of air. But either way, his arm came out of the water with the cup in it, in his hand, full of dirt, and then he went back under the water. And everyone figured when he went back under the water that he just was like, here's the cup of dirt. Now I'm going to go back under the water and swim back to the boat. And he went under the water, and then they didn't see him again. He never came back up. And after a while, people started worrying, and then since he didn't come up, that was when they started reporting that he possibly drowned or whatever. And about 2 weeks later, they ended up finding his body washed up on a dock somewhere several miles or whatever away, or several thousand feet. I don't know exactly where they found it, but it was somewhere else, somewhere on the lake. And at the time that this happened, I was in Maine with my older brother, and my older brother comes up to me, and he had gotten the call from his wife, and she had told him what happened. And he just comes up to me, and he just looks at me, and he just said, and he just with the look in his eyes, he just tells me that that something happened to my brother. He didn't say anything other than that something happened to my brother. And the moment he said that, I just felt in my spirit that I knew my twin brother, was dead. And the moment that happened, I just told him that my twin brother was dead, and he was like, well, kind of looked at me like, how did you know? But it was just something that I felt. And at that time, it was like half of me just left, because we were so close. And I didn't know anything about what had happened. I didn't even know the story or anything. My brother just had heard that they were out on the lake, and he heard a real brief story of what I just told you. He didn't hear any details. He just heard that they think that they didn't know for sure if he was dead, because it has to be so many hours before they can proclaim someone dead. But he just told me that he that he was missing, and that he had gone under the water, but that they didn't know for sure if he was dead. And I just told him, I said, no, he's dead. And I just knew that he was gone at that moment. And I just jumped on the bed. We were in a hotel, and I just laid on my bed, just kind of crying. And my older brother tried to comfort me, and I just told him, I was like, I wasn't mad at him or anything. I just said, no, it's fine. You don't have to worry about it. And I just sat there, like, without really, at the time, I didn't really have a close relationship with God. I did still believe in God. I would pray, and I thought I was pretty close to God, but I was real weak in the Word. So one of the things I'd remembered was, I'd always told myself, was that I did believe that God was in control, and I never would blame God for anything. And that conviction came when I was 5 years old. At one point, I had gotten abused as a kid not in a molestation way, but just in a physical way. I'd gotten beaten by somebody that wasn't my dad. He beat me for something that I didn't do. And I remember at 5 years old, I walked out, and I kind of related the beating, since the guy had claimed to be a Christian. I related it to God, and I remember looking up, and I told God that I hated him. And the moment that happened, the fear of God fell on me, even at 5 years old, and I just fell to the ground, begging God to forgive me. And since that day, I've never even had a thought against the Lord in my heart for anything that He's ever put me through, because of that experience I had at 5 years old. So even though I was weak in the Lord, I never blamed the Lord, but I just knew that I was, at that moment, not going to be able to spend the rest of my life with my brother, that it was done, and all my plans, and we would talk every day, whether or not we were in different states. We would call each other up and talk about everything we had done, and we were just the best friends we had ever had. We never really had many friends either as kids, because we were just so close. We couldn't relate to anyone as well as each other, so we never really had any close friends other than ourselves. So when he left, I just felt like half of me was gone, and all my future plans, which weren't the Lord's plans because they were different than looking back at it now than what the Lord was preparing me for. But he took them for a good reason, which I don't understand completely to this day. But after my brother told me that, I spent the night at that hotel just pretty much not even able to sleep, just crying, and not in anger towards the Lord, but crying not in even anger or any real major hurt for my brother, but just knowing that I was going to miss him, more crying for myself, you know. And the next day I called my brother-in-law, who I knew very well, who I used to frame with, who was on the boat and witnessed the whole thing, and I asked him in detail to tell me what had happened, and he told me the story I just finished relaying to everyone. And when he got to the part of the last time they saw him, with him coming up with the cup, coming out of the water full of dirt, and the top of his head coming up, the moment he told me that part, the Lord instantly reminded me of the experience I had had 3 years earlier. And that gave me like a total peace that he not only, because the fact that the cup was in his hand, the Lord instantly showed me that he wasn't panicking. So there was never even a moment of panic in him when he was swimming back up, because if he was panicking, he'd have thrown the cup of dirt down and he'd have swam with both his hands. And when they said that his head hit the top of the water, that was exactly what had happened to me right as my spirit left my body. And the Lord instantly reminded me exactly of the experience I had had earlier, and he just showed me that he let me go to that experience. And the reason he gave me that experience of seeing into heaven and not remembering enough of it to where I'd be depressed for coming back, but enough to remember the beauty and to feel that peace is the main thing I remember, was that total peace that passes understanding, was to just give me the comfort I needed to be able to go through the hardest trial that I could have gone through. And I knew my brother was completely happy. And after that, I was at like complete peace that he was in a better place, far beyond anything we can imagine on earth, more beautiful and more peaceful, and the Lord, you know, showed me the verse, you know, he will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able, but will with the temptation make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. And he gave me that life after death experience 3 years earlier, just so that I can endure and bear the death of my brother. And after I heard of what had happened, and the Lord had shown me that, I was at total peace at where my brother was. But it took about a year. I just went down and stayed with my parents for about a year, and didn't really work much other than I worked for my dad for a couple days out of the week, not doing much, and I just kind of spent about a year just relaxing and basically learning how to live my life without my twin brother. And then after about a year, the Lord, I guess the Lord just gave me the grace to go back to work. So I went back up to work the same job that my brother was working when he died. And I went back with my boss, and he told me, you know, he was sorry about everything that had happened. And I actually told him the testimony, because even back then I would still tell people, even though I was kind of falling away, I would tell people about what the Lord had shown me and stuff. And I told him about everything the Lord had shown me and let me go through 3 years earlier in drowning in that, so that I would know my brother was completely, you know, in a better place and completely happy and peaceful, and that he had never, I believe to this day, that he never once experienced any pain whatsoever, or even any fear or any anxiety before he died, because when I when I died, I never felt any of that. I just went from thinking I'm going to the top of the water to get my next breath of air, and the next thing I know, I left my body. So I ended up going back to work, and the Lord was able to use that for a testimony to even the people I worked with. But the Lord really, through that experience, just really showed me, though, it was probably something to prepare me to just know that He really is in complete control, and even though that was a hard trial, He didn't suffer me. The verse doesn't say He will not suffer you to go through any trials. It just says He will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able. But He made a way to endure the trial that He knew I was going to have to face. And that was, I guess, the testimony of my experience having drowned and seen into heaven. So I guess that's all I have to say about that one.
Praise the Lord. That's surely going to encourage some people, Reuel, to understand those things and comfort some people about loved ones that have gone on, no doubt. And it's an awesome experience. And, well, it won't be that much longer before you join your brother,
Yeah.
We believe we're in the end time, so it won't be long. Praise God.
And if any of us have to be beheaded or killed for the Lord, I'm just letting you guys, anyone out there that's listening, know that the moment a Christian leaves this earth, they're happier than they've ever been. So no one ever has to cry for any loved ones in the Lord that they've ever lost, because like the tears I had for my brother weren't for him, they were for me, because he's completely happy. And I guess one thing I could add to that, since that time, especially in the next year after my brother's death when I was grieving the most, I had dozens of dreams where I was able to see my brother, and I'm not going to say it was necessarily him, but in the dream, the Lord let me have dreams where I was talking to him, and He was letting me know, and I'm not saying it was His Spirit or anything necessarily, because we know that the Lord doesn't let you talk to dead people or anything like that, but He let me have dreams in which, in the dreams, I was talking to Him, and He was letting me know numerous times that He's just confirming everything the Lord had shown me, just completely happy, and that I didn't need to worry about Him. And if anything was even kind of sobering a few times and letting me know that I needed to take my life a little more seriously, And the dreams, the more the Lord gave me the grace to get over the situation, the dreams kind of got less, fewer and less often, to where I haven't had one for a while now. But that was another thing the Lord really did to get me through it. He was even there through it all and giving me comfort through my dreams and stuff to be able to continue to endure that trial, which was just another thing the Lord did for me. But I would like to tell anyone out there that if you've lost a loved one in the Lord, you don't have to worry about them at all whatsoever, because if you ever saw into heaven and you ever felt that peace, you would not want to come back either. So
Amen.
I just hope that that will encourage anyone who may have gone through anything in losing a loved one in the Lord, or any experience of, anything that might be similar to that the Lord's in control. He's taking care of them.
It reminds me of what Jesus said when He was going to the cross, and people were weeping for Him, and He said, "Weep not for me, weep for yourselves and for your children."
Yeah.
He knew where He was going, and He knew that they still had to stay here.
That's a very good verse to describe that.